Thanks for choosing this free Anfield Index podcast. If you'd prefer to listen to this or any of our other shows without adverts, then now's the time to check out Anfield Index Pro. With AI Pro, you can supercharge your entire listening experience. You'll not only get all of our podcasts without the ads, but you'll have them far faster with our Quick Publish feature available exclusively for subscribers. AI Pro also puts you in the heart of our sound studio, with an option to listen to many of our shows live and interact with the podcasters in real time as the shows are recording. Upgrading couldn't be easier. AI Pro is available on all popular podcast platforms, and we have our own apps for Apple and Android. Just head on over to AnfieldIndexPro.com and get started today.
Hello everybody and welcome to the latest Anfield Index Under Pressure podcast. My name's Dan Kennett and joining me tonight to have one of our summer focus pods. It's going to be a nerdy one, so if you're here for the sports science stuff, you might want to tune out now. But if you like nerds, if you like nerd stuff, you like maths, then this is the one for you, because we are going to be taking a deep dive on, and we're going to call this show "What is New in Football Analytics." So some of the things that you might be starting to hear about now, and that you might see more of in the coming season. So we're gonna go through some key changes, things that might start seeping them into the mainstream, and we're going to help you understand what they are and how to use them. But to help me on this journey, I've got our most qualified sports scientist, Professor of Data Science at Middlesex University, Dr. Phil Barter.
How are we doing? You all right?
I'm good, mate. Last week you said you were going to you had all your doctorates graduating, yes?
Yeah, all good. I think only one thing, we were supposed to do a ceremony on Monday, but obviously the heat curtailed that, or today even the heat curtailed that. So it's we got a few more to go, but all the doctorates are through. It's just undergrads and postgrads. So but hey, it's good to see them all go after 2 years of not doing anything. So it was good. It was good. Very pleasing.
All right, but I have our resident data collection expert and video analyst. It's Mr. Daniel Rhodes. Good evening, Rhodesy.
Good evening, Dan. Anyone who's not in the group has missed out on seeing Phil in his gown in the Discord. Just worth it for that. This is really interesting because one of our first ever shows that I remember you recording, I came on it was the Analytics 101, Dan. And God, haven't we come far from that, looking at some of the stuff we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, absolutely, big time. But we do have
ratio and all that.
Oh yes, purely quant, purely quant metrics. Yeah. But we do have a very special edition this week, and he is potentially coming on board for the new season on UP as part of our rotation option. His name is, I was going to call him the Reverend Richard Cole from the Communards, but it's not. It's Richard Cole. His handle on in AI Discord is at Old King Cole. And Richard, how are you doing, mate?
I'm doing okay, thanks. A little excited, a little nervous, but looking forward to being on and seeing if I can do what I can do.
Excellent stuff, mate. Anyway, so the first thing I've got to say, guys, is that the infamous Neil Ashton hatchet job on Brendan Rodgers and on Michael Edwards. One of the things it said there that football nerds in there with their laptops in their air-conditioned offices, and all I could say is at this moment, what I wouldn't fucking kill for an air-conditioned office.
Same here, mate.
I haven't got one in mind, and it's absolutely disgustingly hot.
It's so hot, it's unbelievable.
We're having our one day in the year at average temperatures over 35 degrees. So welcome to the rest of the world, I think, is the phrase. Anybody listening in America will be laughing, I think, at this, or in the subcontinent Asia will be laughing. But
that's right.
Australia as well. We got a lot of Australian Discord members as well. So yeah, but yes, we're not built for it in the UK. That's for sure.
No, schools closing and all sorts. Trains cancelled.
It's not good. It's not good.
Luton Airport closed because the runway melted and a sinkhole opened.
What it did.
Yeah. Anyway.
It's phenomenal.
Yeah, we just can't handle it. Okay, right. So we've been doing a round table on things to start about. Ideas we've got 5 to bring to you, and what we're going to start off with is something called Optivision. Sounds very exciting, doesn't it? But I'm going to put a little thing into the chat about Optivision, because this is potentially, Bart, very, very exciting.
Yeah, it does look to be. I mean, we've got five good topics here, Darth. I think well played in choosing them. But this does look to be a real big one, particularly the AI involved in it. I quite like that. That's me in the modelling element of it. But it does looks really solid in their presentation anyway. From what we've seen so far, this is going to be behind paywall, isn't it?
Well, this is it. The reason I put it on the agenda is because part of it they're going to start using publicly, which is the shape analysis, and I think they've developed new visuals for shape, which we'll come on to in a minute. But the rest of it is it looks like it's going to be proprietary for them. But I can imagine that all the normal Opta accounts will start putting stuff out, which includes references to some of the stuff from Optivision, won't they? We'll see. We'll probably see.
Yeah, there might
charts and stuff.
Because I think you can pay, can't you, for certain bits? Yeah, I think you'll see like the odd bit seeping in here and there. So, it looks solid from what we can read so far from me. Looks good.
And Rosie, I mean, you are. Yeah. We need to remind everybody you are what's the precursor to Stats Perform. Prozone. Yeah. You are a Prozone video analyst. You're certified, right?
Yeah, you did, yeah. In Liverpool as well.
Yeah. And I think the reason why the Optivision is so exciting is because it's the first time that they've melded the camera tracking data with the event data, Rosie.
Absolutely, and it's clever how they're doing it, obviously. And the things that they're likely to bring through from it are the most important things. You talked about shape analysis there, but and we're going to talk about expected threat later. But the two for me, three that I think one will apply to this podcast, but interests me the most is like the packing stats that we've touched on many a time on.
Yeah.
And when we do the individual match analysis, we always say brilliant passes that break the lines. So they're going to introduce like a line breaking passes metric. Active runs, that's something, we talk about
off-ball runs
all the time. Who are the best at making the best runs is absolutely crucially really difficult for us to measure. And then pressure intensity. I'm like, everyone's getting involved these days, aren't they, Dan?
But think back to your 5 years ago when you did your Prozone. You were talking to the course, the guy running the course about what you do at AI and collecting your data.
Yeah.
And they said, "Oh, well, we collect all that automatically off the cameras."
Yeah.
And didn't he show you the Liverpool?
He did. He showed it was quite basic, but yeah, they did show us the Liverpool one, and Gag's got some of his numbers up, his early under pressure numbers, and there was again, like sometimes we see with the Stats Bomb stuff, there was a lot of similarity, and we could see like the players that they are performing at their levels. We had on that season, like Emre Can, I think John Henderson had a good season.
Yeah, and everybody in public would say, "Oh, it's Lallana," but it wasn't. It was Emre Can and Jordan Henderson, wasn't it?
Yeah. And that's what they said. But they also said that they couldn't tell us any more because they were selling it at the time.
Yeah. But there is a very, very, very nice little 1 minute video in the Optivision thing showing what they do with event data versus tracking data, and I do recommend everybody check that out. Now, Richard, one thing we've always talked about is the way StatsBomb move the needle in terms of the sophistication of their analytics, but this looks to be ratcheted up in terms. If this is like, looks to me, this is a level above. Again, this is like raising the bar even higher now. What did you see when you saw this?
It was something similar to that, yeah. It definitely seems like we're seeing almost like the next wave of what you can do with analytics coming through here. In particular, I think that the active runs metric that they say they're going to bring, I feel like that's one of the first things I've seen where there's like a discrete event that is about off-ball movement in possession that I've seen from any provider, really.
Yeah.
We of course have no idea what's going on privately, but certainly in public, that's the first I've seen mention of it.
Yeah.
And it's funny because you mentioned StatsBomb are usually ahead of the curve on this type of thing. And we know that StatsBomb have been releasing their 360, which is a similar but not quite the same kind of technology.
Yeah.
But it feels like in this case, OptaVision is just going that little bit further, which is unusual.
Yeah, and I think Bart, it's to do with data points, isn't it? The data richness of the data points, because we know that the Opta stuff, the ProZone basically comes off fixed cameras around the stadium, 6 or 8 cameras, is it?
Might even be up to 12, I think, or some of them, but I think it's 8 now. Eight's the sort of minimum, I think now.
But
so yeah,
the difference with StatsBomb is that can you want to remind everybody how StatsBomb collect their data?
It's off. It's a fewer cameras, isn't it? It's from the broadcast. It's not broadcast footage. I think
it's from the footage. Yeah,
it's for broadcast footage. Yeah,
and
so
they've got some very clever software which sits over the top of the broadcast footage.
Yeah,
and collects the events from that footage.
Which is effectively what we teach the students to do with Game Breaker or Sports Code, which is effectively good broadcast footage and then you annotate and you code it up yourself on the screen, right? Where they've got a tech thing or an AI pit, as you say, that sits on top, does it for you. But I think the thing that with the pressures that we all say about StatsBomb, and I would be interested to see with the Opta, is it's about the definitions. So obviously when you're coding like that, you've got to tell the system that's a pressure, that's not, is that kind of thing. And the really exciting thing about this Opta doing it is Opta, I would suggest, are generally more accurate in their data than StatsBomb. And therefore, if they've got that working, that could be a massive game changer using that amount of footage coming in. What's your quote? Was it 1 million?
3 million data points.
3 million data points coming in, and they've got pressures working out. That could be really exciting to see.
Exactly. So it's worthwhile mentioning. While the product is called OptaVision, right? The company which owns them is Stats LLC, and Stats LLC meshes together 2 data providers. It meshes together what used to be ProZone and is now called Stats Perform.
Yeah.
And Stats Perform has got a recruitment engine as well. It's got all kinds of stuff which we're able to see. And then Opta, which is the classic Opta events and the match collection going back pretty much 15 years, maybe even 20 years in the most basic forms of it.
Yeah, probably Premier League start.
Yeah, and this is basically the first time that we're really starting to see them mesh stuff together. So I can imagine the likes of Duncan Alexander, and all the other, and Opta Joe, they'll be the ones who you will see this coming from. And there is a very good Twitter account. Is it at The Analyst?
Yes, I think
which is where they link to their kind of their more sophisticated stuff than the Opta Joe stuff, isn't it?
They kind of write they try and write a bloggy kind of papery type thing where they explain
in
stuff
between,
on that side. Yeah. So I think I think you're right. If this could be, because obviously remember last week we talked about, is it the AMSCO system, which was the Spanish version of ProZone, and then they brought that out and they ended up being the same. So yeah, you can see the development coming through. Effectively, they've just been storing this data for years, or not really doing anything with it.
Yeah.
And then they've suddenly gone, we could do this with it, and this could be. I know I get excited about data far too much, but I just think this could be. You've got that amount of data points.
Impossible.
It's just that amount of data points, and if you've got the algorithm working really well, you could get some fantastic output from that. You really could.
Yeah.
Just to say, Dan, what they mentioned on that page that you've linked to in the group, it's the 4 things because you've got the metrics that they're going to pump out through this, but the kind of things that they're going to look at and they'll be able to do is like communicate player role changes, and they might be able to do that even live they might be able to feed that into managers, and see what the role changes are, passing tendencies from players. We've had similar things like that before, but this is going to give you a new level of it. And this is a key for me. It's like when people talk about players just from watching a game, you often get it wrong. Your biases are involved, but this identifying proactive players, that is such an important thing for a manager to have. If they haven't got it already, but just like low down the leagues, the players who are proactive and those that like what Phil was saying about the active runs and what Richard was saying about the active run. You want to know the information. You want it to be accurate about those players that do the right things, even if it never gets found on the pitch. If you're making a good run, even though the pass doesn't come to you, that's valuable information, isn't it? Yeah. But it's never picked up. No one ever knows about it. because it's a run that you unless you see it with your eyes, you can't measure it.
Yeah, absolutely. And Richard, I know there was a blog on this last year, and it got posted in the UP chat on Discord. It might have been you that posted it, but it was about the active runs, and it was. I think unsurprisingly, I think Bobby Firmino was top, wasn't he? Can you recall that?
Yeah, something along those lines. Was that the one by David Sumter where he was talking about there's disruptive runs,
yeah,
and runs that go towards space. They had a few categories. I believe it was possibly work done with the Barcelona research team. And yeah, basically they were, again, it was, as Phil was saying earlier about definitions, is that obviously there's movement happening continuously. So where do you start and end the part of their movement that you decide is important and which you would define as a run, in quotes. And then from there, if you've got the definitions, then you can then look to see what is that achieving and is there value to that. The one posted in the chat is the one that I'm referring to. Yeah, hopefully that is the same one that others are talking about.
Yeah, there's definitely another one. It was on the analyst as well, but yeah, for sure. That was thank you, Hugh, for posting that in the chat. So anyway, the reason we are going to talk about this a little bit more is the one that they've said is going to be part of their offerings from next season, and again, we're going to expect to see more in the public domain, is the shape analysis. And for the first time, what we'll see is, we all love average position charts, but what you will get is we will now get position charts in possession and out of possession, which we've never had before because of the stats perform cameras and the camera tracking technology. And also what we'll also then get is the shape analysis views of these charts. And what do you want to does anybody who's looked into this and why this is the bit of the game changer, and does anybody want to come in? Well, I just posted.
I would say that I think there are flaws with the average position charts that we use.
Yeah.
Size? I think size one of the best when it comes to granular analysis about this. He likes to.
So what are those pitfalls?
Right. Yeah, he likes to highlight the pitfalls because he seems to pick up things and he talks about it within the context of
change of formation. Obviously,
out of possession is crucial.
Change of formation screws with average position charts, doesn't it? Substitutions.
Yeah.
Tactical tweak.
If you've got a left back that keeps running over to take the corners in swinging off the right hand side, and you've got 5-6 corners and a half, it's going to have a direct impact on your average possession. So you'll get a left back who looks like he's playing centre mid, and it's just a flaw, isn't it?
Because they're volume based, aren't they?
Yes.
Yeah. The ones you got, and they're only on ball, which is. But I think we still say with that caveat, they give you a fairly good idea of your on ball stuff, and I think this bit is really good in terms of off ball, which you can only get by their access to their tracking data and their footage.
Yeah.
But that could be really good when we start marrying up our positions with the pressing shapes that we start. Do you know what I mean? We started to look at how we can marry up certain things in the public eye with the AI heat maps and that. And this could be really good to do that. Could do more than that.
Anyway, I'll let you get a drink of water there, Phil.
Sorry, mate.
But just on the example they used in their blog was Wolves at Chelsea versus Wolves last season, and I think Richard, you can see here that the classic pitfall of Wolves made 3 tactical subs across the front 3, and you can see we end up with everything just getting squished towards the centre of the pitch, as you might expect. Yeah, the defence is broadly okay. Yeah.
Yep.
And then the front 3 are all on top of each other.
Yeah, basically. And one of the things is that, of course, with changing positions, switching wings, all these kind of rotations, which we use to disrupt formations, get aggregated together like that. But then what the AI is able to do is to sort of filter all of that stuff out, and then give you the overall shape, which is being created most of the time, even when individual players might have been moving to different parts of that shape. And so it untangles that knot for you, and puts it out there. And it's also quite useful that it gives you percentages of how much of the match they were actually in a given shape.
Yes.
So you can see for how that could be applied, you can imagine on something like Monday Night Football, which is what they mentioned at the start of this post, about saying, okay, well, from minute 1 to minute 40, this was what was happening, but then the manager made a tactical change, and then the shape became something else. And so you'll be able to tell how the shape was specific to certain moments going forward through the match.
Yeah. Okay. So the other ones that Optivision claims to have, but not going to be in the public domain yet, unfortunately, are expected pass completion, pass options and availability, pass option quality. So really good stuff for playmaking here, and obviously maybe safe possession, maybe versus risky possession players. But the one that we are going to look at next is expected threat. Now, Optivision has an expected threat. There's lots and lots of bloggers out there in the public domain on Twitter who are all producing stuff with R and Python based on harvesting data from FBref. They're all producing expected threat data now. Yeah. You've got StatsBomb who've got their own version which they don't release to FBref. So expected threat, right? Bart, do you want to give us a quick overview why expected threat is the natural successor, if you like, to expected goals?
God blimey, because it's multi-dimensional. Okay, so we can put the link into the paper, but effectively it looks at the options of what the player has in possession in terms of move or shot, and applies a probability to that and what the outcome then, and then also works out the goal probability from them doing either of those actions. It then also looks at the probability of them actually where they move. So if you look at a grid on a pitch, I'm trying to sort of describe the image in front of me, but if you've got a 9 square grid and you're in the middle of that, you have 8 options around you. It'll work out the probability of which the player will move to in those 8 other squares, and then also with that at the same time give you the move, the shot, and the goal probability. So it gives you much more granular level of detail rather than just here's a you're in this square in the box and your XG value is X or your XA value is X. So I think it allows us, I think, to look at we talk quite a lot, or we did towards the back end of the season, maybe Diaz's decision making and things like that.
Yes.
So this would actually give you that in a quantifiable term, providing the data going in as well. This is why I prefer the Opta one to the other one. But anyway, is to tell you, right, Diaz made this decision. Actually, if he was in that position, the XT suggests that he should have made that decision. So that could be really interesting going forward to see how that pans out. But I mean, the maths behind it took me a while to work it out, but it is quite lengthy. But it does make sense, honestly, from me trying to validate that a little bit. It makes sense. And it'd be really interesting to see whether or not the Opta is the same as the one that the other one that's out in the public domain. But if you go on that link that Roty's put in there, I'd love to see how people, because they do a little game in there about they give you an example of a goal, how you can split between so how you can split it down between Ozil and Klausausiak, and then it comes to the end and tells you how the model would work out. So it's quite interesting. So overall, I think it gives us a lot more granular detail for each position on the pitch, providing you in the grid, and that should give us a greater insight to understanding what we started to talk about on the pod end of last season about decision making in the final third.
Not only that, I think it's trying to highlight the contribution of the player before the assist.
Because
what it's doing there with the Ozil and Kolasinac one is it's an absolute. I don't know if you can remember it, but if you go and have a look on that page that I've just posted, there's a brilliant pass from Ozil, like a little floated pass that picks out Kolasinac, and he just cuts it back for a guy to tap it in. Now, that goal doesn't happen without Ozil's contribution, and on that little game, it tells you to estimate. So I'll be honest. It asked me to do it, and I'm pretty sure I did this before, but I did it today, and I gave 65% was Ozil's contribution for that goal. But the expected threat estimate was 86%. So that shows you that, like, Kolasinac has basically done a 1 in 10 contribution to the goal, and it was all Ozil. And that's the key thing that he's trying to illustrate. And one of the biggest things is they've obviously done it with the players, and then when they did it in 2018, Kevin De Bruyne came out on top for the expected threat created. Then Seth Fabregas, and then they've done it this season. And David Sumter did it last season with his 12 model of expected threat. Kevin De Bruyne top again, Trent Alexander-Arnold 4th, and Andrew Robertson 9th. All these pass the eye test, don't they? And that's
massively good. I think it's because we've had this before with XG chain, XG build, difference in XG, but they've all got limits, right? They either take out the assists or they're too far back. It doesn't bring it all together. So yeah, Rosie's spot on there. It brings it together, and I got 82% for the my guess, but there you go. So
82.
Show off.
82.
Did either of you two do it?
No,
Or would you?
no.
I think I was 70% or something like that.
Yeah, that was about mine.
But
Really
Richard,
interesting.
it's not only called expected threat, is it?
No, and sort of, if you like, you can think of it. We compared to XG Chain earlier. That the idea is that it's individual actions which are being ascribed with value, rather than distributing an entire sequence of value equally across all of the events in that sequence.
Yeah.
So it gives you more granularity, and so you can think of it as, okay, whenever an event happens with the ball, what is the value of that event? Which leads nicely into the name of the other one that we have, which is from StatsBomb, and they call it on-ball value. So it's basically the same thing. They've got their own methods mathematically for how they work it out, but unfortunately we don't have access to those because that's
and they
only...
don't put it on. More importantly, they don't put it onto FBref, do they, either?
Nope.
No.
That's only for their paying customers, unfortunately. The only thing we get is that sometimes their Twitter account will put out things, or they'll do little articles, usually just to advertise the product. But that's the little snippets we've gotten. I'm hoping that they'll be doing their season previews like they did last year, where we got some nice, juicy on-ball value stuff there, like the fact that apparently Trent had been, according to them, the highest on-ball value player in the 2021 season, which was very flattering for a Liverpool fan. But the broad strokes is that this is their version of it, and it utilizes some extra context compared to the expected threat model that you'll get from most of the bloggers, that sort of thing. Because they have access to their own private 360 broadcast footage showing you player positions and other contextual things, in the same way that StatsBomb's freeze frames have helped with their expected goals model versus some of the other ones. And hopefully Optivision can do the same for Opta as well.
The way I see it, this is very much like a VHS versus Betamax scenario here. We got on-ball value versus expected threat, and one of them is going to stay and catch on and become the norm, and the other one is going to have to change its name later on.
I love Dan's early 80s references.
Well, I could have said, what was it? I was going to say Blu-ray, but I forgot what Blu-ray's competitor was.
It was a high definition DVD.
HDVD.
That's right. Yeah, that was on Xboxes. Yeah. Oh, I remember that.
Yeah, so if you went back Blu-ray or Blu-ray or XDVD or HDVD.
Well, you could have gone Laserdisc as well if you want to go really far back. You want to go.
Yeah. Anyway, but Rhodesy, more importantly than that is there's another version of expected threat, isn't there? Because we know about this because Dr. Ian Graham, head of research at LFC, went on to the Freakonomics podcast and told the whole world about it.
Well, he did. He called it possession value added or goal probability added. And David Sumter in his piece talks about this, and he says it's basically exactly the same. And Ian Graham talked about us using it in recruitment during 2018-19. And now obviously Opta and StatsBomb have got their own. But it's just...
Yeah, we think we started building that model, our own in-house model for expected threat, goal probability, late 2017.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, with our rocket scientists and
with Will Spearman.
David Steele, and who's the other one? I can't remember his name. That's really insulting. I can't remember the other fella's name.
Oh yeah, I don't know.
Anyway,
Come on, someone, stick it in a group. But yeah, and this is again something because someone told Gags, didn't they? Off record, I don't know if it was off record, but it just said that Liverpool weren't that keen on using XG, and because they've got the next stage of it, but they had it 5 years ago. So they might even be on another level now. The things that we're talking about in the UP, what's next in football analytics, we might be talking about what Liverpool are using now in 5 years, because that's how it works.
Tim Waskett, Dave. Tim Waskett.
Yeah,
is the third musketeer. Yeah, Tim. So David Steele, Tim Waskett, and Will Spearman.
But I think you're right, Roti. I think we are probably, but we're going to be behind because we're not behind the paywall. You know, I from my knowledge of working with clubs, XG is not used. You know, they have their own in-house models. It just happens to be because in this article you've linked, this is the season before we go supernova, isn't it? This is the season we get to Kiev, and if you look at the profile of 3D Viz, I think we're fourth actually behind Tottenham and United, but you can see the profile, I think, visually starting to come close to City, and then it would have been interesting to see what it looked like here when we went supernova. But yeah, I think we're doing something far and away from that. But then that's not a surprise because they've got people paying every day to do it, haven't they?
Yeah.
Anyway, it should if you're paying people who've worked in CERN and people who've worked on the...
Yeah, you just do you know what I mean? The people who literally look at the Matrix and go, "Yeah, that's my life." You know, they're gonna pick stuff out. You know.
Yeah. So I think the real strength of the Opta model here, or the Stats Perform Opta model, this is their definition: is that expected threat establishes the likelihood of a shot happening within the next 10 seconds of play if a player were to receive a pass from a teammate. The model takes into account the on-field movement of all players, both defensive and offensive, before assigning a probability for a shot occurring. And it's basically that is the advantage which no one else has got. Because although StatsBomb have got their nice freeze frames of their video footage and stuff they can do stuff with, they haven't got the position of all 22 players on a pitch at all times.
And I think that I was going to say they could probably Opta can do it live as well.
Yeah.
Whereas StatsBomb won't be able to do it live.
Yeah, they'll only be able to track it off the event move.
Yeah.
And
this is why, in terms of process, this is why the StatsBomb XG doesn't update until the following morning. Yeah, because
yes,
absolutely.
Some are produced immediately.
Yeah. Okay, so lots and lots of people talking about XT, just like XG was back in 7 years ago in lots of different names of it, lots of different versions of it. Right. So the big thing with XT is, because it was getting posted in the UP Discord chat a lot last season, is it's a black box. Each model is a black box. We don't know what happens within that model, and all we get is some output. So when you have that, it's very difficult to establish what does good look like, because you don't have, like you do when you go on to FBref, or you go on to even Understat for expected goal, where you can easily get whole leagues, 38 matches for each team, seasons of history of data, and you can make league-wide comparisons. Because when you just see an expected threat for a match, it's very difficult to apply any real mean. All you can do is, if you got, say, for example, say that Chelsea Wolves match we talked about earlier on, right? Say that you went to one of the bloggers who was putting out his post-match stuff there, and you saw his expected threat. All you could do would be look at the expected threat for all 22 players within the context of that match. And you wouldn't even know, for example, whether the high figure for XT in that match was actually a high figure overall. It might have been a really low game for XT, but the high person in that game wasn't actually that good. You know, so it's without that context, it's very difficult to know what good and bad look like with XT. But
it was like this in the first years of XG as well, wasn't it?
Yeah. I think you've also the other variable that we've now learned to take out of XG is penalties, right?
Yes.
So it'd be interesting to see how that starts coming in, because presumably the same problem will occur in XT, that you'll have all this. If there's a penalty given in that move, then that will inflate the XT value. greatly because it will turn the goal scoring opportunity to a point off the top of my head. You know what I mean? It will turn it to a massive chance rather than whatever the chance would have been from that play. So, yeah, that'll be really interesting how it develops. I would still back the Opta to come out. So if that's your Betamax, then I think Betamax might win this war because I think this type of model with that many calculations, the quality of data coming into it is critical. And that's why I think the Opta data coming into it with that many cameras will produce a more cleaner, clearer, valid outcome than the stats one. But happy to be wrong if that goes the other way.
But neither of them are sharing it publicly anyway.
No, they're not. No. No,
It's
So-
absolutely vital, though, Phil. Look at our pressing data. We couldn't do it without the video footage. If you've got 8 cameras on every game and you're able to get...
It's a huge advantage, right?
It's a massive advantage over doing it freeze frame with an AI.
Because when if we gave you 8 cameras worth of footage, would it make your job easier or harder? Or do you think
As I've spoken with Dan on the pressing WhatsApp group numerous times this season, the amount of times they cut to a replay and I miss like 2-3 presses,
Yeah.
frustrating, right? It's so frustrating. So I think there's like a 1%
error rate
influence on the game, which doesn't sound like a lot, but if you've got 300 presses, it could be all sorts of things going on.
Yeah.
And if you have that 3-4 times a game, it could be, it could go up to 20 presses from a 300 press match.
Yeah,
So
and with the fixed cameras around the stadium, it's unbiased. You're going to get that all 22 players. And
exactly.
Yeah.
So a question then for those who were there for when expected goals was going through this same process. How long did it take for expected goals to go from being something that was behind a whole bunch of black boxes on blogs to starting to get itself onto websites that were accumulating it and giving it to you in enough context that you could start properly seeing what was going on?
Cayley did a really good, detailed breakdown of his model quite early on. He was one of the first ones I saw, and then obviously Understat turning up was a big thing because they had such a wide sample of data that we didn't have before, and it was free.
And also shot-based XG as well for the first time with Understat. It was a game changer.
Infogol has obviously been one of the best. It's a tough one, I think, for providers because you've got the individual guys like Cayley, and then the Dutch lad whose name.
Sander Teggen.
Sander.
11 Teggen 11. Yeah,
Teggen 11, and so you've got the individuals, and then you've got the massive data providers like Opta, and Opta have started putting theirs on Fantasy Football Scout in the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, 538 was another one which came on fairly early.
Which is it's a different take on it, and it's quite a optimistic model.
But XG definitely grew in the early days through public collaboration, through bloggers mainly, and you went through just for the whole thing of all shots, and then collecting stuff manually, then to scraping data from, say, typically from Who Scored was the go-to at that point for getting actual shot data. People who could actually code in Python and get stuff to scrape there. Then all of a sudden they ended up with databases of 20,000 shots to get better models that way. Then it was factoring in, information about the key info like headers versus foot shots. Then it was, the shot type, set piece, free kick, open play. What came after that, Rhodesy?
Well, we're going to go on to the difference, the changes in what's done with their XG. But things like having how many players are in the way, where's the keeper?
Cayley was the first one to do dribbles, wasn't he, and stuff?
Yeah.
But do you think the acceptance came? I'm just thinking with a different angle. I completely agree with you guys coming from West Developed, but I think the acceptance came when it first got put on Match of the Day.
Yeah,
huge factor. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's like that's when it goes from being Twitter to mainstream TV.
So if Opta's expected threat that they're providing with Optavision, then if that could make its way onto the Sky Sports coverage or some other media coverage which has got a contract with them, then that might start seeing it. You want someone like an Understat to come along, don't you, eventually? Who can start providing you with expected threat.
Yeah, it's just the issue, as you said, though, the contract, the league is with Opta, isn't it? So, and they all that's almost a monopoly in terms of how to get it to the media. Because if they said it to Sky as this being the next big thing, and they can get Carragher to explain it, it'll be on every game on Sky Sports.
Whereas, I guess
the others won't.
FBref don't have a contract with the Premier League to get on a screen, so we're up to do. So
the analytics point of view, Dan, I just think it's really interesting because I did an analysis of the Liverpool Swansea 5-0, maybe 2013, and I was there and I watched it, and there were 30 shots, and then I broke down each shot in a post and had a look at the various things at the time. And I remember looking at it; it was like the metrics that you had then were: was it a big chance or not?
Yeah.
You had Paul Riley, Football Factman's spam model that I was using. You know, how close was it to the goal? Because he had various things. So that was a basic extreme.
It was Ben Torvani's expected goals calculator.
There you go. And he used to go and put, and then I did that, and I went and put the values in.
From New York. No, from New York. Danny from New York City.
Altman.
No.
The
other one. Anyway, he had like an expected goal simulator as well. You put in
Page.
Danny Page, yeah, Danny Page.
Yeah.
Anyway,
but that's the difference, isn't it? That's why XG came about because people who were doing amateur analytics were saying all shots aren't equal. They're definitely not. We need to figure out a way to validate and show this to the public. And obviously, we've had all the. How many times have we all been called virgins when we start talking about it? You know, but this is where it came from. This is how it evolves.
So the last trying to wrap this up, what I would say is that there's neither Opta or StatsBomb are going to give us this information, right? The only way we'll get it and we'll see it is if you follow the stats bloggers. I can think of two off the top of my head. There's Call Me Alfredo. At Call Me Alfredo and at Mark R Stats. Do anybody know any others? There are others, but I can't think of any off the top of my head.
No, but
Mark R's the one I use.
Mark R Stats, yeah, and he's got a bot now which puts it all out, you know, and he'll give you XT every game. So, what I would suggest is just to always take that with a pinch of salt, and unless you're going to start collating and recording the outputs of all Mark R Stats and translating into your own data sources to do aggregated analysis, just be careful because it is that black box. But yes, and they will.
We do acknowledge that fact with our pressing, don't we? That we haven't got the context of the league. That's the biggest.
All we can do is compare it against other Liverpool matches.
Against Liverpool matches, yeah.
Yeah, but we do have that in our own database, so we can do that. Whereas with Mark R, it's just screenshots on Twitter every time, so you're going to have to aggregate stuff yourself.
Exactly.
But yes, just be clear, those guys all will do scraping from FBref to basically work out their models, and they will somehow be hacking the individual StatsBomb match files to get this data. I don't know how they will do that, but that's the only way I can think they must be doing it. Right, so that's expected threat. Next one on the list is the stuff which is really available publicly, and that's StatsBomb via FBref and their new tweaks for the coming season. So, Richard, there's been a big publicity drive back, and I think it was started at the end of May, as soon as this last season finished, didn't it?
Yeah, May 16th is the article date.
Don't waste any time, do they?
Nope. They know what they want to do.
Yeah. So there's two main ones. We'll look at one by one. First one is changes to their XG model, and secondly is the line breaking passes. So, okay, so let's look through the XG model tweaks and what do we? First of all, do we know what the end result of this is going to be? How much is going to move the needle in terms of their accuracy? Do we know what the end outcome is going to be like?
So, as with the usual things on this, it's usually very small changes on the aggregate scale when you've got the entire sample, and most shots will not be affected too much. But it tends to be the extreme events that become improved when you have these things.
Goalkeeper out of position.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So you'll have a bunch of different sort of things. I believe shot velocity, for instance, is one of the things that they're adding in now. And so if a player took a shot which was like unusually slow, maybe because they'd like stubbed it or something and it was only rolling along the ground, then that would be an extreme event that might get affected quite drastically. But for the most part, it's going to be very small changes, just sort of like a 100th percentile, here or there, basically.
Yeah. Okay. And what are the main things to look out for in what they've done to upgrade their XG model? Do we have a list of things that have changed?
Well, one of them was the shot execution that I mentioned with the shot velocity in their post-shot XG models. I believe I'm just trying to find the part of the article where they do.
Yeah, I've got the list. It's on the StatsBomb XG Summer 2002 upgrade. It's got improved. Well, it always talks in like very.
They like to market themselves, don't they?
They do, yeah. The new model has an improved response to blocker and/or goalkeeper positioning. Doesn't mean anything in one sentence. They do have a good couple of paragraphs explaining it. Reliability on long shots, better understanding of goalkeeper positioning and its contribution to suppressing XG values. That's really important. We all talk about it. Not only does it help you understand how good a shooter is, but it helps you understand how good a keeper is at preventing. That's the next point, understanding finishing skill. And then they're updating it now, so it's because they were one of the only models with the defensive pressure element involved. I'm not sure of how much improvement it's going to give, to be honest.
I'm also dubious about how much you can improve the model from what it was based on the footage they're using.
Process.
Yeah, shot velocity is tricky unless you've got a really high hertz of sampling rate of the image.
Well, they will be constrained by the footage, which is frame rate. It's a certain frame rate.
It's a certain frame rate, so the accuracy of that is already reduced. You know what I mean? You're not directly you're not directly measuring the speed of the ball. You're measuring it on a freeze frame, and whether or not the sample has been right to capture it, or you get a blurred image. So
is that just an equation from the point the
that'll be an equation.
There will be a mathematical way of proving but it's the distance of the shot, and then what they can actually do in terms of calculating a time lapse with their coding. Based on the number of frames they've got in their frame rate. So there is, if there's any guys who are doing machine learning coding listening to this pod, tell us what the margin of error on that's going to be.
Well, I'm just thinking, like, surely they must understand the different frame rates from different footage that they're going to be using, because the footage that they're going to get for the Premier League is going to be very different from like Belgian League 2, isn't it?
I think they'll get the same. Honestly, think they'll get the same quality feed though. Because their whole business, I think the business model is based on the quality of the footage, right? So I'd imagine they've got a contract to get high def footage for all the leagues they do it for.
Yeah,
like 1080p. I just can't. Yeah, that's such a rate limiting step for them not to do that. I think that will do that.
They're not stupid. They've got some very good data science.
Exactly.
Right? So I'm sure they'll have looked at the potential constraints and potential margin of error and still think it's worthwhile doing.
Oh yeah, so I think it's improving. Yeah, I think for us we'd have to make
can I ask
the data point
to Richard again? Follow up. Based on the things that you've read about what they're changing, do you think the biggest improvements is actually going to be to their single match XG figure rather than the aggregated player level analysis?
For certain matches, yes. A better way, I suppose, would be thinking about it in terms of the consistency of their single match values, because if there is an unusual event that occurs in that match which would not be a large part of their sample, then in previous attempts, if that would not be factored in, and therefore you might find that for that individual match, the XG values that they're giving could have one or two shots that are inaccurate, and that then affects the whole. Here, with these things now being sorted out, it would mean presumably that the certain individual matches in which the unusual events occur would improve. So you might find that if there's 10 matches, 8 of them are going to stay the same, 2 of them are going to change, and they're going to be better now. So you can put a little bit more trust, if you do trust the model, that the specific match that you're on, before you could have worried that it was maybe one of the two. Now those two are accurate as well, so there's less reason to worry.
Yeah. Although saying that, because they give us this in the public domain via FBref, and it's still not going to make a cat in hell's difference to me, because they're still going to do it to one decimal place, which absolutely bugs the hell out of me.
Nothing frustrates Dan more. Use of one decimal place.
I mean, XG value to. I mean, that's why you can only use the FBref data in aggregation, isn't it? Really, because you can't. Yeah, because if somebody has an XG value of 0.1, right, it could be anywhere between 0.05 and 0.14. That's massive.
It is
a 1 in 20 chance to a 1 in 7 chance. For fuck's sake. What is it? Yeah. Anyway. Right.
Regular listeners will understand that.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, line breaking passes. Okay. Now, I have a really stupid question to start off. Right. We already have, and we've had it since the very start of Opta. We've already got through balls. Why do we need line breaking passes? Richard.
So, essentially, because through balls, you can kind of think of it as that through balls are a subset of line breaking passes. They are a type, but not every type.
Very good. Very good.
So, because of that, essentially, what we know about through balls being really good, this is essentially extrapolating that out to all manner of line breaking passes that can do it in different contexts. Especially given that sometimes, the classic one would be the Thiago style pass, right? We know that Thiago doesn't get loads of assists or anything like that, but we know that what he is brilliant at is that the way he can pass often can break open opponent structures in a way that completely destroys their defensive shape, and then creates a situation where our forwards can start exploiting the fact that they're all unbalanced and out of position. And so these line breaking passes, which can sometimes be in deeper positions, are very useful for the more sort of less obvious parts of play and good attacking, especially in build-up. And so when StatsBomb talk about this in their article, they're basically just using it to essentially do what you were talking about earlier, Phil, with definitions. So they've got like a little picture, which you'll see in the article that's been linked in the chat, where they've got a bunch of different types of passes. So they've got, for instance, the attacking switch, which is where the player, you can imagine this as being the Trent Alexander-Arnold pass over to Robertson on the other side. You've got attacking forward passes of different lengths. You've got crosses into the box. All of these are different contexts in which you might be passing the ball through defenders, and they can have different effects. And also players will have their own styles that they like to do. And so this helps you to look at the types of passes that individual players might make and where they're generating the value that they are with their line breaking passes, essentially. So it's just a use case that comes from it.
So unfortunately, it looks like this isn't going to be made available to us on FBref, correct?
Nope. No.
So this is the proprietary stuff again, right? Do we know how they would present line breaking passes in the quantitative way? Obviously, they're going to have a nice visuals, right? Obviously, but in terms of, would it be in the same way they do it progressive? Would they have line breaking passes per 90, line progressive distance per 90, and maybe defenders bypass per 90?
I imagine that it's going to be the first two. They released another article about ball progression where they did a investigation into packing stats and how useful those are for predicting goals versus their own on-ball value stuff. It seemed like the conclusion they came to was that basically the best thing is if you have both, but the on-ball value on its own was better than packing on its own. And so in the absence of being able to put both of them together, they were fine with just on-ball value. So I would imagine they will tell you how many line-breaking passes a player makes and what specific types they were. They will give you the distance, and they will also give you the on-ball value generated by that line-breaking pass.
So can I just be reading with my cynical hat on? Can I just clarify here that StatsBomb wrote an article that said that their product metric was better than
Absolutely,
their competitors' product
They
metric?
didn't.
Okay.
Oh, really? That's so unlike them, Darth.
Like I say, they like to market themselves.
Can I just add one point on the marketing? They have included Trent Alexander-Arnold as the top image. In the chat.
Yeah.
Like the two best line-breaking passes in world football at the moment to me are Trent Alexander-Arnold and Kevin De Bruyne. If you those are the two. If you're gonna like with the expected threat, like with this new metric, those two are gonna come out on top because just from the eye test of watching them both, and they're both two of the best passes I've ever seen. Thiago's the other, and Thiago's the most valuable one in this context because he's the one that doesn't have the outcome metrics that you need to know. So, like, Liverpool fans make all the arguments about John Henderson being too safe in possession and Thiago being unbelievable. I'm not sure it's that clear-cut, but it's definitely a difference. Thiago makes riskier passes that break lines, but doesn't break the final line, which is where the through ball metric comes in, whereas Trent does both. Kevin De Bruyne does both.
I think it's a fair shout, Rosie. I think it's adding a layer of granularity to that data, isn't it? Richard, do you know if they're going to do two combinations? So can you have an attacking switch and that be an attacking wide ball?
I don't think so, because the attacking wide would have to be up the line, I think.
I think the definition of a switch, I think it might be able to do both, because this definition of switch is it has to go from it has to go a certain amount of meters across the pitch from right to left or vice versa. It has to. I think that there is a number on it in the StatsBomb definition.
Because like one of Thiago's best balls is the switch that then fades down the line. City at Wembley, he fades one in, a switch to Mo down the line. So it's not a straight switch. Do you know what I mean? And that backs up what Rosie's saying about he put a player in a position, but he wouldn't have done that with a straight ball.
Yeah.
It has to be a bit of bend, but I don't know how that. Yeah, I just wonder whether you do too.
I'll come back to what I was saying before again, is that, we might not even have these in FBref, and if we do have them in FBref, it's just going to be a purely quant view of it. We're not, it's just going to be, scraping,
because it'll be the passing comes in as medium, short, long, doesn't it?
Yeah.
On FBref, so this might come out in a few years' time once they've given up flogging it, and it'll be like
when they releases the public side after that. But the most important thing, as I said before at the start, is that Optivision also have their line breaking passes one as well. I don't know which came first, but. Yes. So, but again, obviously, the benefit there is again they do have that whole field, 22 players view. So, in theory, the Optivision would be able to do the packing as well, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and they would be able to combine that with their expected threat to add it all together.
Because I would assume the most valuable part would be the amount of opposition defenders you do take out of the game. So anyway, I guess it depends on the zone of the pitch you're in to start. To be fair, but yeah. Anything more on StatsBomb and public? We are going to see, Richard, I think it's going to say, we're going to see the odd stuff come out, the odd blog from StatsBomb, the odd stuff from the official account, which is going to have this kind of stuff in it, isn't it? But we're not going to get access to regular data.
Yep, it's the unfortunate side effect of the success of data in football is that now there's so much money in it that the data providers don't need to release it to the public so much anymore, so it's going to take a little while longer, I think.
Yeah. So
and
back in the day,
enough, isn't it? It's fair enough.
Yeah, back in the day, it was hard enough to get the Opta data without getting an Opta license. Then Gags was the first to ever break that wide open. And then
also subscribed by John Henry.
That's mad. Also, there was like Blackburn and Fulham, where they were definitely subscribing to AI, the Stats Centre. So that was the way.
Portland were under Allardyce.
That was the original way of getting Opta data, but now you can get Opta data through the apps and Stats Prozone. No, not Prozone, StatZone. Sorry, StatZone, who scored still main ones.
Football Scout.
But then, to be fair to StatsBomb, they did put so much stuff into the public domain on FBref, and it does, in terms of their on the quantitative side, Rich, I don't know what you think, but it does dwarf what you can get from the Opta sites, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And like you can get all kinds of proxies as well, the progressive passes, all this sort of thing.
Yeah. But then we have to wait, unfortunately, Bart, for the next bit, somebody to release into public.
Yeah, I think you're right. We have a moan at StatsBomb being the model they are, right? And the fact they got rid of slices, which no one liked. But some of the work they have done to bring stats to the public domain, you do have to take your hats off to that, because without them, I don't think there would be the understanding of what data analytics is, really.
Well, you wouldn't have the likes of Mark R Stats and Call Me
No, you wouldn't, because otherwise you've got to bring it together from 3 or 4 different sites, and people just aren't going to do that. I know we do for a pod, but that's different, isn't it? I'm just saying on the general domain. Then.
Yeah. Okay. Now, another person, another site upgrading their expected goals model. Richard, it's Opta. So what are Opta doing with their expected goals model?
So they're doing essentially they're using, doesn't say it explicitly, but you can imagine that their Optavision is definitely helping with this. But they have got their Stats Performs AI Intelligence Quinn, that's what they call it, which has basically added in extra contextual factors to their shots that will allow for their data to be more accurate. Similar to what we were discussing before, it's about taking certain more unusual situations that will help those individual shots to become more accurate, and which will be broadly small effects across entire season aggregates, but which will help the specific shots get a lot better. So we've got here their list. So they're now including the clarity that the shooter has of the goal mouth, the amount of pressure that they are under from opposition players, the goalkeeper position, the foot which was used, weak or strong, and headers, and then preceding actions, like you would presume through balls or rebounds. These are the sorts of things which you would think are likely to be included, although they don't say what all of them are.
Yeah.
And then they then end it with just saying, and other stuff too.
Yeah. But Rhodesy, there was a short-lived betting site. I think it was StrataBet.
Yes.
And we did them on UP while they were publishing stuff, and that's where Ashwin Raman got his big break, wasn't it? Was working with StrataBet.
Yeah.
I think it's better known for Ashwin for being the Indian fella from Dundee United who got attacked in the media by proper football men.
Oh God, that was disgusting as well.
Yeah, anyway,
nothing about the article was in any way provocative, and it just got a load of stick from a load of idiots. We've all had it, though.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, so but we talked about StrataBet back at the time, and we as long as it was available in public, which was only about a year and a bit, I think, because of the defensive pressure stuff, Rhodesy.
Yeah, the defensive pressure stuff, like we talked about with the StatsBomb model, it's one of the most important things. Just think about it, picture it in your head. If you've got a shot 10 yards out, it's centrally 10 yards out with just the keeper to beat, or you've got a shot 10 yards out that's just come from the second phase of a corner and there's like 6 players in front of you, 5 defenders or 3 defenders, 2 your own players and a keeper. The XG value is a massive difference. It has to be. StatsBomb on the article that was linked earlier have got a really nice little visual about how players being in front of a shot influences the XG value, and it's crucial. So you could have a 1 in 2, a 50% shot, or you could have a 5% shot. So you could have a 1 in 20. You know, that's the difference that the defensive pressure makes. It's so important to understand that when you quantify an XG. And that's, you've got Understat, who are obviously public and give you a huge sample, but don't have this kind of added value. but you're not going to have the added value without a huge investment. So this is the most. I think it's one of the most important aspects of XG models. If you are not taking into account the defensive pressure on the shot, then you could be a long way out. I think Wisecout have got a pretty poor model when it comes to these kind of things.
We just use Wisecout for video, really. Yeah.
Yes, but they shouldn't be that bad.
No.
And they were taken over by, was it Huddle, or they were taken over by someone who should have made a difference. But even we were looking at some of the models that they in like the Coca-Cola Cup final, another 80s reference.
Yeah.
And
could have said milk.
Yeah, and all the and the games where we couldn't get a large sample of XG models, which is kind of what we're talking about here, isn't it? Because the reason why we take such a huge sample is because it gives you a good solid average of the best and the worst of the models that we're using.
Yeah.
Whereas if you just go, let's use the Wisecout model, which some people do, it's going to be inaccurate a decent amount of the time looking at. They've got shots on there that are like 45% from some of our players, and then you go onto the main models and it's like 10%, and you're just like, what are you looking at?
Yeah.
Why is your model pumping that out?
Just wrapping up this one, I just want to say that one of the most important, in my opinion, one of the most important public analytics blogs of all time, I've just put it in the chat, is Bodies on the Line. Now, this is by Laurie Shaw. Now, Laurie made the news about a year ago because he was hired by Manchester City, unfortunately, as they attempt to bridge their analytics gap to Liverpool FC. But this was back in 2017, and Laurie did this using the StrataBet data. And I put it into the live show chat, but there's the 4 images on how light pressure or defensive pressure changes the value of the shot in terms of quite significant ways. So this is going to, the good news though, Bart, is because it's Opta's expected goals model, we are going to get this next season.
Indeed, which
get it through Understat.
We get it for Understat, obviously in the public on the public feeds.
Football
Scout, yeah. If you look at some of the images, it backs up what Rosie said there. These are spot on. You know, you've got the one they used Liverpool on 2 of them actually. They've got Jota with an open goal on the current model for the season this was in. It was a 0.68 chance, but on the new model it goes up to a 0.9 because there's no one in the way of Jota making the shot. Yeah. And then the other one is a one-on-one with a keeper, which was given a 0.36 because it's one-on-one with a keeper. But actually, the pressure on the ball reduces that chance down in the new model to a 0.06 chance. So I think this could be really good. And as you say, we will have access to this data, so that'd be really good. That'd be really good. Really good.
And the shot clarity one is almost just like trigonometry, isn't it? Because it's basically how you basically got between the shooter and the frame of the goal, you're always going to have a triangle, and depending on that positioning of that first defender, how close they are, how much of a view of the goal you've got, that's probably almost more important because than the actual the defensive pressure, because it's almost certainly going to result in a block if you haven't got the angle to shoot.
Definitely, and this comes back to what you said at the beginning. They've sort of married together their data collection side with their, you know what I mean? The whole part of the company now seems to come together to create a better model of performance, a better model of stats coming out. I really be amazing to get behind the scenes because this linked in with XT with the rest of it. You could get some really good stories come out of that.
Yeah,
in the data.
Right, and then the final one we got to look at is not a data collection company, Rhodesy. It's an individual or a fella who is a university science graduate, John Harrison, and he's now working with a goalkeeper consultancy. Is that right?
He's created his own goalkeeper consultancy. 2 things. One is like second generation Gags, is there? Because Gags was the original. I just go and analyse individual matches from video and collect data points. But John came along and absolutely has revolutionised goalkeeper analysis. As a keeper myself, I think he's one of the most the best follows on Twitter. He is absolutely incredible. Anyway, he analysed every single, and I think this is the most important aspect of his analysis, he's analysed every single one-on-one situation in Premier League football for the last few years. He's clearly a very clever guy. He does his logistic regression and stuff, and I don't,
We'll get Bart to talk about that.
Phil can explain that stuff, but he gives it gives 5 examples of what a keeper should do in a one-on-one situation, and how he's taken and quantified this is incredible. So a keeper can wait really deep and then react to the shot. So you David De Gea. You can engage and then react to the shot. Engage and smother the ball, engage and just spread yourself as wide, or engage and just try and block it standing up. And it's a really interesting aspect of goalkeeping, because if you look at some of the numbers, and he did, and you can get it on YouTube, so go and have a look. I'll post a link on, but he goes on to Redmen TV, the stats show that we've done with Chris down a few times.
Yeah,
and he goes on there and he compares Alisson to David De Gea, and this was game week 29 of last season. It's absolutely so important analysis. This, he says Alisson's overall value in goals was plus 15 from the average, right? Plus 15 goals from the average. Now in a season with that many, and this is just Premier League, so in a season with
is that plus 15 goals prevented?
No, it's plus 15 goals if you have a look at the 3 different metrics that he considers, which is total goals stopped, which is your general shot stopping, your one-on-one, and your penalties. Alisson didn't face any penalties, so that's 0. His one-on-one stopping was plus 7 expected goals, right? Which is the best in the world. There's no better at one-on-one stopping, according to John. You've got total goals prevented, which is coming to claim a cross, your through ball sweeping, your shot handling, and then you've got total goals distributed, which is the ones he's contributing to, which is his general passing, and then his passing under pressure. Every single metric that Alisson came under is positive. He just adds value to our team, which we all know it passes the eye test, and this is the brilliance of it. But us stats nerds love this kind of breakdown. Now flip that to David De Gea. So general shot stopping, Alisson plus 2 expected goals. David De Gea plus 10. He's an absolute shot stopping machine. He's one of the best shot stoppers you're ever going to see, David De Gea. Fact, and has been. But he's absolutely a terrible overall keeper if you look at the other metrics. So he's minus 5 on total goals presented. Man United lose 4 goals in 29 game weeks from his cross claiming. That's how bad he is.
He's passive. Yeah, he's always been passive.
He can't claim a cross. It doesn't come to claim crosses, or he can't. His one-on-one stopping just plus 1. It's nothing. It costs them goals on his passing. A goal. Minus 1. Is it
what I would say is though, he could
levels
still be
of metrics though, Dan, isn't
he could still be a success though, but in the team would have to the team wouldn't be able to play in certain ways.
Well, the team is adapting because he cannot play with a high line. Whereas Henderson, their other keeper that they're paying $100,000 a week to never play, when he plays, they under Solskjaer, they played a high line.
Yeah.
It's just endemic of Man United's philosophy at the moment. They've got individual performers in positions, but they've got no unity of structure. They're not thinking David De Gea is amazing at stopping shots, but we need a keeper that's going to contribute to our overall tactical setup. It's vital. We've got Alisson who's got individual attributes like the one-on-one stopping, like the passing, like the coming to claim crosses, but he's also a brilliant sweeper keeper, and he suits our tactical system. Now, when we had Mignolet, even under Klopp, we struggled because he wasn't that keeper. Yeah. And thankfully, United are acknowledging that. So, yeah, John Harrison is one of the best. He does, if you have a look at the thread, and it's a thread from June 17, he's pinned it to the top of his Twitter feed. Go and have a look at that thread because it's brilliant. Because he breaks it down with individual examples, but he also gives like an optimal what a keeper should be doing in certain situations. And
so
Alisson just absolutely wipes the board with everyone.
So, but this just in bring it back to kind of what we said before about XT. It's slightly different to XT, isn't it? Because John is the only one doing this.
Yeah, he's the only one looking at what does he call it? Is it preventing goals or
Shot prevention?
Shot prevention.
And goal prevention and shot prevention.
Goal prevention, which, funnily enough, you talk about a lot with defenders. Like there's that missing metric, but you can actually do it at keepers. The other stat that I thought wrote him was that De Gea lets United concede a 0.12 expected goals per 90, which is like crazy from his. It's just nuts. But regression is, if anyone wants to know, is just analysis looking at output and potential inputs on that output to then predict that output. So this is looking at various components and saying, right, what's the output? Is the XG? What can be impacted by that and to what degree? That's what regression does. It's black box stats, but he's put it in the open really well because he's fantastic.
Yeah. So there is now a website, goalkeeper.com.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that this is going to have stuff which is going to be maintained throughout the season. And at least with John's Twitter feed is he does put a lot of data out there. He hasn't got to the stage of uploading Excel sheets and Google, for example, in Google Drive or anything like that. But he's still pretty liberal, isn't he, with sharing his data? I think
he's pretty good.
Surprised, aren't you, Dan, that he's not been absolutely employed by one of the top clubs and just taken out of the stratosphere?
Well, I'm not going to blow my own trumpet, but I helped him get onto the Carragher thing last year because on Sky, I think it was about 3 matches to go when Carragher did the big thing on Monday Night Football. Because Carragher DMs me quite a lot and asked me for ideas, and I actually said just look at this guy's Twitter feed, and then he basically gave me a massive shout out on the show, and then it's just people who are nerds doing nerdy things in their spare time. That's all it is. It's the classic, isn't it?
He's a Cambridge graduate as well.
In astrophysics, I think. Yeah,
he's a really clever. Do you know my worry with this is that because he's that open, someone's going to take his method.
Yeah, someone's already. Yeah, no, it's not they're going to. They definitely are doing already.
Do you know what I mean? That's my worry. Is like he's put it out there.
Anything about him.
Yeah, and it's going to be on StatsBomb or something.
Well, he's a scientist, isn't he? So he's looking to
increase knowledge in the field. Yeah.
The other thing about his work, which I feel like this is the only time I've ever seen any stat that does this, is that it actually analyzes the value of technique, which I have never seen that for any other event.
Yeah, spot on.
Which if you could tell on a player's pass that they used, outside the boot, inside of the boot, on the studs, whatever, and you could analyze the choice of technique and the value that had, that would be a coach's dream. So the fact that he is doing that for goalkeeping is just absolutely incredible work. And the fact that he can then quantify that into goal difference values, it's just extraordinary work. So like everybody's been saying, same theme, check him out, because although it's only for goalkeeping and not all events, it's pretty much the best data you're going to get, almost like from anything.
In fact, it's probably the only aspect of football where the best public data on a specific topic is public.
Yeah, no, you're right.
I'm not sure there's any other aspect of football data where you get this level of granularity and detail and analysis, and absolutely brilliant. It's got both sides. It's got the video and the stats.
He's absolutely superb. I love it. It's
so good.
It's really good. It's so good.
I didn't know he was so young. You see, John Harrison. When I always thought he was quite an old guy. I didn't know he was a recent graduate. And I watched the Redmayne one, and he's about 20. What's up with him?
Babyface. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the last one I just wanted to plug was the analyst.com as another source, because we already mentioned there were their blogs. But if you look at that one here, that Peter McKeever, who's from the ops side of the business, you can see a load of data there, which you can now get as an additional data source. and that's obviously for last season's Premier League. And they do have some new metrics on there as well, which similar to the stats bomb style of things, such as carries, which is moving with the ball at the feet, but not necessarily a dribble. It will include dribbles, but it's more than just dribbles. And also zones, sequences, which is number of events in a sequence, as well as things like proxies for pressure and control as well. So I do recommend theanalyst.com as well as something else to look out for this season. So any other business, chaps? Richard, any other business?
Just some sort of very touch on it because it's not relevant really so much to the immediate future, more like a long-term thing, is that there is research being done including some of our own Liverpool researchers, Ian Graham and Will Spearman, into
this one.
yeah. I'm not going to go into all of the technical maths because it's a lot. But essentially, what they've done is they've researched ways of using algorithms to take broadcast footage and try and approximate the positions of players that are off screen. And once you have that, you can then turn that data into kind of like a pseudo tracking data. It won't be as good as actual tracking data, but it will be an approximation that can allow you to then use some of the use cases of tracking data. Like, for instance, the pitch control models that were developed by Will Spearman. I believe that's probably why he was on the team, actually.
Yeah.
And they actually do test it.
Trying to help StatsBomb get closer to Optivision, yeah.
Yeah, and so essentially they made pitch control models, and then they tested what those looked like when it was with tracking data and when it was with this algorithm and a few different methods, and they found that it was, it'll be up to yourself as to exactly whether the difference is satisfying to you, but they seemed to think that they liked the results that they got. So that could be something in the far future that you start seeing, is that Opta or StatsBomb or whoever could start at putting in things like pitch control and other aspects like that into more public data eventually, or at least into data that goes into their media teams, because
Nice.
rather than just being only for clubs.
You two old cynics.
Yeah. Now, Rosie, any of the business?
Just like to ask a little question for what you three think might come up in 5 years. We've obviously touched on it. What are the possible areas that people are going to go into that in 5 years we're going to be discussing on here? What else do we need to know?
Well,
is it going to be
the pinnacle for me? The holy grail is the value of defending.
Yeah, I was going to say defending.
Yeah, on that actually, I have an interesting idea where, if you think about it, when a player is interacting with the ball, it's a continuous flow of motion, right? We can say that we are going to have a definition which is a dribble, but exactly how we define that beginning and ending is something which we have to come up with arbitrarily. So that means that all of the events that exist in on-ball data are all, ones that have been chosen arbitrarily and which we've agreed are useful definitions to have. And we can argue about
similar definitions 10 years later as well, Richard.
Yeah. And so what I think is going to happen as these hybrid datas allow sort of pseudo tracking type stuff to happen more regularly and on more available, is that we're going to start seeing the same thing happen to off-ball stuff. So, the amount a player moves over the pitch over 90 minutes could be a continuous flow of motion. But if you're going to say this player made a run to the back post, at what frame do you decide that actually begins? What's your definition for the beginning of a run and the end of one? And, if you start to make these definitions, then you can start creating metrics and you can start comparing the value of them.
Yeah.
So I think that in 5 years' time, maybe beyond, we're going to start getting that sort of work will start to be done, and there's going to be lots of arguing over whose definition is better. And
can you imagine a full 90-minute analysis of like a Virgil's defensive position?
Exactly, yeah, and that's where the defensive, did a player decide to move towards a player with space?
Exactly.
And like we talked about disruptive runs with Firmino. Well, what about the opposite of that, which is covering runs, but I guess you could call it, by a defender, where they move in a way that resets their shape to make a broken block become fixed again.
Brilliant.
These are the sorts of things that you're going to have to come up with definitions that you can make it repeatable. I think that's where I see it.
I still fundamentally can't get my head around the concept of being able to count something that doesn't actually happen.
Yeah.
Phil, any other business, mate?
No, I think the tech advancements, like the EA modelling of a goal, for example, the AI offsides, I think that will influence our analytical world more over the next 5 years.
That's in 1 year's time, that isn't it? It's going to.
That's what I'm saying. And then
as
the camera technology improves, the thing like EA can only model so many number of goals or whatever else in a game. If they could do, I think you'll find that could be done in real time very shortly.
Well, you get the next generation of HD cameras. You're going to improve
exactly, and that's what I think. So I think that would add another level to what we're looking at, and probably matches in what Richard's saying, because then you could actually be able to get a 360 view of all the movements going on for a game.
Yeah,
in 3D.
Anyway, that has been brilliant. Richard, how did you find that?
It was very enjoyable, actually. I thought I was going to be a nervous wreck the whole way through, but I had good fun.
What we'll do, I'm going to ask the listeners for feedback.
Oh yeah,
I think
yes, but thank you ever so much for taking the time, Richard, and thank you, Rhodesy, and thank you, Bart, and we will be back next week for the season preview. Until then, up the Reds.
We hope you enjoyed listening to this Anfield Index show. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel so future podcasts find their way to your device automatically. There's nothing quite like fan engagement, and we'd love to know what you think of anything discussed on this show. The best way to get in touch is over on our free Discord community, where both podcasters and listeners debate the hottest LFC topics 24/7. Sign up free now at AnfieldIndex.com/Discord. You won't regret it. You can also follow us on Twitter at Anfield Index and find us on Facebook by searching for Anfield Index. Oh, and before you go, we'd love it if you could leave us a 5-star review on your favourite podcast app. It only takes a couple of seconds, and it means the world to the people who create these free shows.